My name is Hilda. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is the 20th of July, 1993. I did get it in last night, but my sponsor told me a long time ago, you should always give your sobriety date when you speak in Texas, especially because otherwise they wonder the whole time whether you have one. So I thought I better get it out there today. And Tad grabbed me as we were coming in, and he said, there was a little confusion over the workshop. He said, because it says AA speaker workshop. And he said, somebody said to him, oh, I'd like to learn how to be an AA speaker. It's like, no, that's not what's happening. It's on sponsorship. I love sponsorship. I love talking about sponsorship. I love being a sponsor. I love being sponsored. And it's a funny thing, sponsorship. How many people in here have a sponsor? How many people who have a sponsor who know they're your sponsor? You laugh, but a friend of mine went to Minnesota, and he met a gal that said, "Oh, you know my sponsor, Hilda." And he said, "Oh, Hilda sponsors you." And she goes, "Oh yeah, sponsored me a long time." I haven't talked to this gal in 16 years. I mean, I don't know what she's doing, but so I think the best way to figure out what a sponsor is the pamphlet on what is sponsorship. It's one of my favorite pamphlets in AA. It has what it is and what it isn't, and I think that's fantastic. And if you ever wonder why somebody would need a sponsor, if you heard me talk last night, you know why I need one, right? I'm a thinker. I'm a thinker, and I think a lot. And I have some fantastic ideas. And I have a sponsor who helps with that, let's say. But I also have a best friend in the fellowship, a trudgeon buddy, if you like. And when I'm not sure about something and I have a fantastic idea, I tend to run it by her first. Because if she laughs and says, "Let me know what Sharon says," I might want to rethink it. You know what I mean? But a sponsor... Julie told me not to get too controversial. I don't know that I can do that. Because I feel very strongly about sponsorship. And I know others do in different ways, but technically a sponsor is just someone who's been through the steps and is helping somebody else go through the steps. That's the bottom line, right? Now, I've seen sponsorship in all sorts of forms. I'm 29 years sober, 10 months and 3 weeks or something, and I've had 4 sponsors in sobriety. My first sponsor and my current sponsor are my strongest sponsors, and the 2 in between were a little dodgy. And I say that from experience. My current sponsor I've had for over 18 years now. That's probably, apart from my wife, the longest relationship I've ever had, And I sponsor some women that I have sponsored for a very long time. And I am the longest relationship they've ever had, So there's a lot that comes with sponsorship besides taking somebody through the steps. It's a relationship. But my experience is it's a lot easier to sponsor somebody when you don't like them. It really is, because then it's just about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? We're just getting through the steps. I'm just trying to give you some tools so that you don't blow up your life and you can help somebody else, So when I don't like somebody, it's much easier to sponsor them. The problem is when you start to like them, right? You start to like them, and then, you have that moment of, I don't want to hurt your feelings. You can kill somebody not hurting their feelings, But if you've had any conversations with me at all this weekend, you probably know I'm just not that sensitive or soft. I'm just not. When I sponsor women, I tell them right out of the gate, if you're looking for a mother, I'm not it. I'm not it. I do not have a maternal bone in my body. I am a sponsor. I will help you through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'll share my experience, and I'll tell you what, if it's not my experience, I'm not going to share it with you. I've never had children. I'm not going to tell you to throw your son out because he's using. What would I know about that? But I know my sponsor knows about that, so I send him to my sponsor, I've never been married 3 times and had an ex-husband who's given me a hard time. I don't know anything about that. but I know somebody who does. You know what I mean? I've never had a partner cheat on me, but I know somebody who does. But I'm not going to pretend I know everything about everything and give advice on stuff that is not my experience. You know, some people do. I'm just not that girl. And anybody I sponsor will tell you that I will give you the rope. I will help you pull yourself up, or you can hang yourself. It is your choice. It's your choice. You know, you've probably gathered by now, I do not qualify for Al-Anon. I don't. I really don't. You know, I have sent some of my sponsees to Al-Anon because they need it. And one of my sponsees said to me once, well, how come you don't go to Al-Anon? You know, because you hear people in AA say, oh, but, you know, your friends are alcoholic and you're in alcoholic. You automatically qualify for Al-Anon. No, you don't. I don't. And I'll tell you why, because I was talking to my sponsee and I said, look, here's the deal. If you drink, I will be disappointed, but I'll sleep well. I'm not going to drive around with your husband looking for you. I'm not going to go to all the bars and drag you out. I'll sleep well. And she said, Hilda, that's a terrible thing to say. I said, that's why you're going to Al-Anon, you know. It's really that simple to me, you know. And I don't, yeah, sorry, Julie, I really tried, but I don't think there's any wrong way to sponsor. I really don't. You know, we know a gal who is crazy as a loon, crazy, good bit of sobriety. We've known her whole sobriety, and she is crazy. But I tell you what, when she sponsors women, she gives them a great foundation. She gives them a great foundation. I wouldn't let her babysit my dog, but she sponsors people really well when they're new. You know what I mean? So I think that's where God is in the mix. You know, God is in the mix when it comes to sponsorship. You know, I see some people, the way they sponsor, and I just don't get it. You know, I'm not going to tell you what time to brush your teeth or to get up in the morning or whether to quit your job or get a job or, you know, you have a life to live. And the pamphlet on sponsorship says quite clearly, it's about individual circumstances. You know what I mean? Because there are some sponsors who are mothers. There are some sponsors who are really tough. And in Pacific Group is like a small town. If you haven't been, I would highly recommend it. But it's like a small town. And it's got small town vibe. You know, everything's going on in Pacific Group. And we have extremes of sponsorship. You know, there are some people who are really super rigid, and you've got to do it this way, and you have to do this, and you have to do that. You got to do 7 meetings a week, and you got to call me every day, and you got to. I'm not that girl, right? This is what I do. If you want what I have, do what I do. You know, Johnny Harris talks about sponsorship being monkey see, monkey do. You know, I can tell you what to do all day, but if I'm not doing it, it means nothing to the sponsee. It means nothing. You know, it's really about being the example and getting people through the steps. You know, my first sponsor took me through the book line by line, page by page, and whether there's an action, we took it. And whether there wasn't an action to take, it was on me to do something. And that's what I do with the women I sponsor. You know, I do have the women I sponsor call me every day. Not everybody does. But my sponsor has me do that, you know. And that really, Monday to Friday, weekends are off, you know. Call a friend on the weekend, you know. But don't blow your life up. But that's all about discipline. For me, that's been about discipline. You know, not every sponsee has their sponsors have their sponsee call them every day. Fine. You know, Julie and I sponsor very differently. And we have very different sponsees. You know, they say every light gets its bug, right? And I have a sponsorship meeting of the women I sponsor and the women they sponsor on a Tuesday night on Zoom, and we've been doing that since COVID. And we go through different bits of literature. We read the big book cover to cover. We did the original manuscript of the big book cover to cover. If you haven't read that, that's entertaining as hell. And right now we're doing AA Comes of Age. And what I figured out not that long ago is that all the women on that meeting are geeks. They're AA geeks. Every light really does get its bug. You know what I mean? We were reading through the original Grapevine articles by Bill Wilson, and some of them from like 1947, when he was really talking about the traditions, right, and how they came about. Everything in AA, and I'm not going to pretend to be an AA historian, but everything we have in terms of the traditions and the concepts are born of pain, right? Pain in AA. There's nothing better than reading through that with somebody newer. We have a couple of gals who got sober on Zoom. They're only just finding their feet in real in-person meetings. I won't say real, that's not right. In-person meetings, because Zoom is a meeting. I'm not going to get into that controversy at all. Not where we're going today. But for somebody new, the history of Alcoholics Anonymous can be so helpful, because otherwise it's like, I heard a speaker once say, it was an hour talk, and they stood up and said, I'm not going to talk about my drinking, because it's really about recovery. And I couldn't hear anything the speaker said. Because if I don't know you have the problem I have, why would I think your solution would work for me? You know what I mean? It's the same thing with sponsorship. If they don't know that I have the same problem they do, why would they listen to me? Why would they do what I do? They have to know where I come from. I had a gal in my house once who kind of looked around and was like, yeah, but look at all you have. You got a nice house and a nice car, you have a great job, you've got money, you're in a good relationship. I was like, yeah, but I didn't come in like that. You know what I mean? I came in a lying, bedwetting whore. Where I am today is a different woman than what came in. Kind of the same woman, but dressed a little better. But that's Alcoholics Anonymous that has gotten me here. And quite honestly, it's strong sponsorship. It's sponsors who really were not afraid to hurt my feelings. It's sponsors who are not my friends. None of my sponsors have ever been my friends. I don't go to the cinema with them. I don't go shopping with them. That's just not how, I don't deal with my sponsees either. It's just not a thing. Some people do, and if that works for you, I think that's fantastic. And I think the whole key about sponsorship is what works for you. The reality is my first 5 years, absolutely everybody I sponsored drank. Everybody. I figured I was just a treasurer, you know what I mean? Never going to be a sponsor. And I had a fellow once that I was new in sobriety, and he was newer, and he asked me to sponsor him, and I talked to my sponsor about it, and she said, you have to stay ahead of him. Just stay one step ahead of him. If you stay one step ahead of him, you might be able to help him, you know what I mean? It didn't work out very well, but we gave it a go, you know what I mean? But funny thing is, because I ended up kind of, basically telling him, you're a small cog in a big wheel, and if you can't see that, you know what I mean? I didn't handle it well, let's say. But a few years ago, this fella found me on Facebook, and he was now 8 years sober, and he said the only reason he came back to Alcoholics Anonymous was because I was nice to him. You never know, right? You never know. And my sponsor talks a lot about the ripples, right? Our job is to throw the stone in the lake. Where the ripples land is really not up to us. And I've had that a number of times. Sometimes when we sponsor people and they leave, or they drink, or they go to a different sponsor or whatever, sometimes I forget that our job is to plant the seeds, right? We just plant the seeds. There's a gal who is still in Pacific Group, but kind of goes to a lot of other meetings, but she took her cake not that long ago, and I sponsored her at about, 20 years ago. I sponsored her first 4 or 5 years of sobriety, and whenever she takes a cake, she always thanks me for that. 20 years later, I don't know about you, but sometimes I forget I even sponsored her, you know what I mean? But she remembers. She remembers. And I think that's so important when we're sponsoring people, to remember that we're just about the seed planters and the pebble throwers, When I go through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous with new people, I really try to stress that The program is their responsibility. It's not mine, right? It's not my job to keep you sober. It really isn't. If you're not going to take more responsibility for your sobriety than I'm willing to, then we have a problem. I'm not going to work harder for your sobriety than you are. You know what I mean? I go to a lot of meetings. I do a lot of service. I work full-time. At one point, I did 2 degrees while going to school. I'm in a relationship. I have a life. I have a big life, you know. But I have a big life because Alcoholics Anonymous comes first. You know, I am not the girl to call if I sponsor you. I am not the girl to call to say, I can't go to the meeting tonight because I have a test tomorrow I have to study for. Nope, not that girl. Because my experience is the more I do in Alcoholics Anonymous, the more time I have to do other things. It makes absolutely no sense, but it is absolutely the truth. You know, the more I do in Alcoholics Anonymous, the more time I have for everything else. And I have a busy world, a busy life I work in. And I had a sponsee recently who was just starting to sponsor. And she had a gal that really did not want to play, right? The girl doesn't want to be sponsored. She has zero interest in sponsorship. But this gal I'm sponsoring won't let it go, right? She's chasing her down. She's close to stalking the poor thing. You know what I mean? And I said to her, you know, just leave her alone. Relax a little. You know, the gal has her own path to go, and that may include drinking. And the sad part in Alcoholics Anonymous is that some people do have to drink so that the rest of us take it seriously. It's a horrible reality, but it's true. If nobody died, why would we take it seriously? You know what I mean? My first sponsor was, well, she was hardcore. And she was exactly what I needed at that point in my sobriety. And the sponsor I have now is exactly what I need at this point in my sobriety. And I think, you know, when I moved from Belgium to London, my first sponsor actually said to me, Hilda, I think you need somebody to take you somewhere now. I think we've come along as far as we can go. I think you need to find somebody else. And I really appreciate that. In hindsight, I really appreciate her insight to that. You know, that she was aware that I needed something else now. You know, and I learned a lot from her, but she was embarrassing to have as a sponsor. She really was, because we'd be at meetings and somebody would be whining and she would pass money across the table and say, just go drink. When you're ready, come on back. You know, here's a tenner, go. You know, and I would be mortified, you know. Now I understand where she's coming from, you know what I mean? But at the time, she was just an embarrassment, you know? I was like, oh, Sandy, will you stop? You know what I mean? But she was hardcore. She was not messing about with this. And I understand it now. And it's funny because a lot of people nowadays really want, because people come out of treatment centers and they come from all different places to Alcoholics Anonymous. They're not just coming in off the street. I didn't go through treatment. It doesn't make me better or worse than anybody who did. But I went straight into Alcoholics Anonymous and, you know, shook it out and whatever. I don't know that I would actually recommend that today because you don't have to. But, you know, a lot of people come in with different ideas. And I think when I'm trying to sponsor somebody who has come from a treatment center or a religious center or some other area that has sobered them up, it's important for me to explain to them what Alcoholics Anonymous is and what it isn't. You know, what it is and what it isn't. And I shared a little bit about that last night. You know, my first sponsor, Sandy's version of that is a little hardcore for some people. But AA is not, it's not high school. And some people need to be reminded of that, especially if you're part of a big group. A little group, it's a little easier because then it's principles before personalities. Get on with it. Put your big girl panties on and, you know, grow up. In a big group, it can be a little harder, right? Because there's so much going on and it's so easy to get sucked into different things, you know. But like I sponsor a whole lot of very young girls right now, and high school is what it feels like to them sometimes. Oh, she doesn't like me and he's talking about me and, you know, she's dating him and I used to date him and she's only doing, it's like, who cares? Just stop. You know what I mean? People have drank over far less. You know, so get over it kind of thing. You know, I said to one of the gals I sponsor, she's hilarious. And she was in this whole realm of, she looks at me funny and I don't want to go to the meeting because she's there. I'm like, seriously? We don't give up our seat in Alcoholics Anonymous for anybody. I don't care if you slept with them and you're mortified. You take your seat the next day. That's what we do, right? So she's talking about this gal looking at her funny, and, you know, I know she doesn't like me and whatever. I said, look, you need to stop mad dogging or dog facing her across the room, you know. And it went super silent on the phone. And I thought, good for her. She's actually taking this on board. And she goes, do you mean mad dogging? I was like, dog face, mad dog. We were close, you know. It's like, just stop. But AA is not high school. It really is not about being part of the clique, and it's not about being the smartest or the speaker or the treasurer or having a commitment where they say your name every week. You know what I mean? That's not Alcoholics Anonymous. And people get sucked into that stuff all the time. And I am not that girl. You know, I am not that girl. I truly do not care if you like me or not. I just don't. And my saving grace was my first sponsor. You know, she explained to me that this was not Alcoholics Anonymous, but more importantly, what she said to me is that nobody in Alcoholics Anonymous ever has to like you. You know, our book talks about an unlovable creature in his cups, right? I was an unlovable creature in my cups when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, nobody wanted to help Hilda. Nobody wanted to ride with me anywhere because I was obnoxious, you know? I was a pain in the arse. And the thing about my home group was they didn't care, right? They went with me anyway. You know, she sponsored me anyway. You know, and that's the most important thing in Alcoholics Anonymous. The more unlovable you are, the more we should be helping you, right? The more we should be going out of our way. You know, I have a sponsee She has a fantastic story, and she comes from the streets, and now she's super well educated, whatever, just the AA story of success. And she looks for you in the room if you're new. If you're new and you've got F off across the top of your head, she is doing a beeline for you, right? She loves it. She's looking for the one with the arms crossed in the back of the room. She sits right down next to him, you know. And that's what we do. You know, that's the brand of sponsorship that I come from. You know, when there's somebody drunk in a meeting, I'm the one they come to take them and talk to them. Because I'm not afraid of alcoholics. I'm not afraid of drinking alcoholics, and I am not afraid of the newcomer who's come off the street. You know, and if you are, then I would highly recommend you get over it. Right? I'm serious, because you want to know, you know, if you talk to a lot of the old-timers, especially our man here with his 64 years, you talk to some of the old-timers, right? A lot of them came in rough and ready, right? Just because you come in a little bit more polished nowadays doesn't mean you don't need the same level of help, right? It doesn't mean you don't need the same level of help. I sponsored a gal once who was 14, which is very young. Right, very young, and I had never sponsored anybody that young before, and I really wasn't quite sure, because up until that point I was hardcore, and this is the way we do it, and everybody does it this way that I sponsor, right? And I'm talking to my sponsor that night, and I said to her, look, Sharon, I'm not quite sure what to do with this little one. You know, she's very sensitive, and she's very young. And she said, you know, Hilda, the most important thing in sponsorship is meeting people where they are. Meeting people where they are. It had never dawned on me before, right? I don't have to sponsor everybody exactly the same way, so I was a little bit more sensitive with this little one, a little more delicate with her. It was also the first time I had to learn what to do with people's families. I'd never had to deal with a family. Her mother was calling me because her mother was my age. You know what I mean? Her mother's calling me about her daughter and how worried she is about her and what can she do about her. And I hooked her up with Al-Anon. You know, I said to her, look, I don't know how to help you. I can only help your daughter, but here's my friend in Al-Anon's number. She can help you. You know what I mean? Because I know that I am not the be-all and end-all for all of it. You know what I mean? Go to the experts. Our book talks about that in terms of, of therapy and other programs. And, if you have problems other than alcoholism, go to the experts. My humble opinion, if you have problems with an alcoholic, go to Al-Anon. They're the experts. We are not. You know what I mean? We are not. But this young one, we used to call her Peanut. Because when she asked me to sponsor, I said, look, are you willing to go to any lengths? Because Alcoholics Anonymous takes work. And she said to me, I would get on my hands and knees and push a peanut across the floor with my nose if you asked me to. I thought, I've never actually asked anybody to do that before, but boy, that's a great idea, So we called her Peanut from there on, and you know what? She really did the work. She really did the work. She had a lot of other problems other than alcoholism, and she got help for that. But I sponsored her for a good while before she went off. Her family moved. But it was my first experience of truly having to meet somebody where they are, instead of sponsoring everybody exactly the same way. My sponsor often talks about people, everybody's in a different place of their 180-degree turn. Right? Everybody is in a different part of that turn where we're turning it around. And it is impossible for me to judge you if I don't know where you started from. If I don't know where your 180 degree started from, I start thinking that your 100% should look like my 100%, And sometimes it's hard for me to remember when I start sponsoring, especially new people, that they don't have 29 years sobriety. They don't know what we're talking about in here, It's not natural for them to put Alcoholics Anonymous first, right? It never dawned on them that maybe they should go to a meeting on a Sunday night, not just Friday night, you know what I mean? They don't know that we have meetings every night of the week, right? They don't know that there's different types of meetings. Speaker meetings and women's meetings and men's meetings and actors meetings and writers meetings and whatever, right? Discussion meetings. They don't know all that. And that's part of sponsorship, is to introduce new people to Alcoholics Anonymous. And quite honestly, it's about making Alcoholics Anonymous attractive, that they want to come back. And it's funny, I'd never heard the Texas preamble before, and I've been in meetings in Texas before, but I hadn't actually heard that. And I do like the Texas preamble where it talks about making Alcoholics Anonymous attractive. We want people to stay, but we're not going to make you stay. You know what I mean? The book is super clear, and I love the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I love where it says that, you may need to do more drinking. Step over to the nearest bar. It might be worth a case of the jitters. As a sponsor, it's important for me to remember that. It is not about me convincing you you're an alcoholic. I'll go through the steps with you, and I'll help you identify whether you are or not. I'm not going to tell you you are or not. And quite honestly, I am not going to answer the question if you are or you're not. That's for you. You have to believe you're an alcoholic and want to stay here, right? I'm not going to force anybody. I've had some interesting sponsees over the years. We were talking about this the other night. I sponsored a whole group of gals at this one point. 3 of them went and got boob jobs. And my first thought was, if you have what I want, right? Maybe that was part of it. I don't know, right? They all went out and got boob jobs. I have zero opinion about that. You want to get a boob job, get a boob job, but then do not come back to me and complain about the attraction you're getting from your big boobs. Right? This was your choice. This is what you do, right? The other thing that I'm very definite about with my sponsees is, if we've talked about something 3 times, and I have given you direction, my humble opinion, what I think might be the best course of action based on my experience, and you're still whining about it, then go do what you want to do. Go do what you want to do. Come back to me when it all blows up. But But I'm not gonna argue. I do not argue with sponsees. If they start arguing with me, I just hang up. It's rude, I know, but it makes them think enough to call me back. You know what I mean? The other thing is, if you're not doing as much as I'm doing in Alcoholics Anonymous, we're going to have a problem just because I am busy in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I've had this discussion with a number of my sponsees about being the example to their sponsees. And I think that is the greatest gift in Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're annoyed with your sponsor and you complain about them and, you know, what a pain in the arse they are, and you just, you know, they're so hard, and then you get a sponsee, right? It changes everything. If you haven't got a sponsee yet, please get one, because it changes everything. You know, we were talking about this the other day. You know, it's very easy to be single in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? If you're not looking to get in a relationship and you're just doing AA and it's pretty easy in Alcoholics Anonymous. But if you want to know what your real character defects are, get in a relationship, right? Get in a relationship. That's where you find out what your character defects really are. That's when you'll be really grateful you've been calling your sponsor all the time so that they're up to date. You know what I mean? It's a funny thing, you know, I hear people say all the time, you know, I don't understand why you have to call your sponsor every day. I wouldn't do it. Okay, don't. But here's what I get from that, and I've had this experience, right, is if I'm talking to my sponsor regularly, it doesn't have to be every day, but regularly, so that she is always up to date, right? Even if I just call and say everything's good, great day, moving on, right? When the shite hits the fan, I already call her. There's no question whether I'm going to call her when everything goes, I was going to say tits up. When everything goes wrong, it's no question, because I've been talking to her and we have this relationship. But I had a gal call me, golly, I guess 2 weeks ago now, who I hadn't spoken to in months, right? I assumed she got another sponsor. I was hoping she got another sponsor. But she said to me, you know, it's all gone horribly wrong, and I didn't know what to do, and I hadn't been calling you, and I didn't want to call you out of the blue with a problem. Wouldn't have happened if she had been calling regularly. She would have never had that hesitation. So instead, she stayed in pain for another couple of weeks until she actually picked up the phone. You know what I mean? Now, I can't fix things, but sometimes people just need to be heard. They just need to be heard. They just want to know that somebody heard them. They don't necessarily need an answer all the time. You know, they just want to know that somebody heard them, and maybe there's something they can or can't do. Maybe there's not. And, you know, in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it doesn't spell out sponsor anywhere. It doesn't. And I've had great debates with people about whether sponsorship is really an AA thing or not, because it's not in the first 164 pages. Bill was very young when he wrote the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the 12 and 12, if you read the 12 and 12, is full of my sponsor said, my sponsor did, my sponsor, my sponsor, my sponsor. Almost every step mentions a sponsor, because he was a little bit longer sober and now he's got experience, right? So yes, sponsorship is part of Alcoholics Anonymous, and even Bill in his early days had spiritual mentors. But I do like page 96, and you know the old story about the dyslexic sponsee who was asking about relationships, and instead of 69, the sponsor had him, he thought the sponsor said 96, which is why it's important to be direct with your sponsees when you tell them what to read. So the sponsee's all about, I can't get in a relationship and I don't know what to do, and said read 69, top 69, and instead he reads 96. And of course 96 says, do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again, right? You are sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer, right? Find it a waste of time to keep chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. If you leave such a person alone, he may soon convince that he can't recover by himself, right? So when you're talking about sex with sponsees, let's make sure we're sending them to the right page, right? But I love that page 96 because it applies to sponsorship as much as it applies to 12-step work, right? If your prospect doesn't respond, find somebody who you can help. You know, my sponsor has told me over and over again, you are robbing somebody else of your time who really wants to work on themselves. You know, if you keep trying to work with somebody who really doesn't want to, you know. And of course, the most important thing of all of it is that they're helping you more than you're helping them, right? People have said that over and over for years, and a lot of people don't necessarily take that on board, but it's absolutely true, because sponsorship is where I have learned about patience, tolerance, unconditional love. I learned that through sponsorship, not through the step work, because the step work's all about me. Sponsorship is all about you, right? It's all about helping you. I have to get out of my little bubble to help you with sponsorship. You know, I was driving once to a meeting in Upland to speak, which is middle of nowhere. It's a good couple hours from where I live, and it was pissing out the heavens with rain. And my sponsee calls me in the middle of all this, right? I'm trying to drive to speak, and my sponsee calls and says, you know, I'm a little tired. I don't think I'm going to make the yard tomorrow. Now, I had a moment where I really wanted to eat this girl alive, right? Because I am going to any lengths, and she doesn't want to get up in the morning, you know? I was like, what are you talking about? But instead, I took a breath, and I said, look, here's the deal. Go to the yard, don't go to the yard. And the yard is a Pacific Group thing, if you don't know. Go to the yard, don't go to the yard. But here's the thing. I am driving 2.5 hours in the rain to go speak at a meeting in Upland. And I'm going to end up driving 2.5 hours home tonight in the rain from Upland. And my happy little arse will be in the yard tomorrow morning. Your call. Right? Your call. Go, don't go. She did show up, but that's really my brand of sponsorship, right? I'm not gonna yell at you that you don't take Alcoholics Anonymous seriously and blah blah. I'm not that girl. I am not that girl. I will just give you what I'm doing, and then get on board. Don't get on board. You know, I think I have. And again, it's small town AA, or AA is a small town versus small town AA. But sponsorship is not about how many people I sponsor. In fact, when people ask me how many people do you sponsor, I'll tell them about half of them. I mean, I'm not putting notches on my belt for how many sponsees I have. You know, I don't believe in sponsee stealing. Ever hear of that? Did they do that in Texas, where, you know, you're a sponsee stealer? It's a thing, right? Where you know, somebody swaps sponsors, they go from somebody else to you, and the other sponsor gets all upset about it. It happens. It absolutely happens. And here's the thing. I do not care. I don't care if I sponsor you or not. I just want you to get the help you need, right? I really do. If somebody else can help you more than I can help you, then good on you, go. Get the help you need, right? And a lot of people do not have the same opinion. There are some people who really take this whole sponsorship thing like, I don't know, part of the ego, I guess. You know, that it's so important to them that they have a lot of sponsees, and, you know, that their sponsees don't fire them, right? First of all, you can't get fired if you didn't get hired, right? There's no such thing as firing a sponsor or firing a sponsee. But I also will not try and continue to sponsor somebody who won't do anything, right? If you're not doing what I'm doing or willing to take on some suggestions, then I'm wasting your time and mine. I'm not going to be anybody's sponsor in name only, apparently, apart from this girl in Minnesota, who still thinks I sponsor her. But I feel like I can actually do more harm than good by letting somebody think they have a sponsor when they don't. You know, so I love both my first and my current sponsor. The ones in between were dodgy, and that's the truth. You know, one of them was much more interested in my wife than they should have been, and the other one was just not interested in Alcoholics Anonymous. And for the time I had them, they were perfect, because it was where I was and that's what was happening. But my first and my last sponsor have been my strongest sponsors, and they have both prescribed to the same sort of approach to sponsorship, right? Join me, do what I do. If I can help, I absolutely will. Let's just go through the book. That is the core of sponsorship for me. All the rest of it is fluff. It's just fluff, you know. I have a sponsee currently who came from somebody who was really rigid and really rough as a sponsor, and let her go because she wasn't doing enough, right? So she asked me to sponsor, and she said to me, you know, what 4 things do you want me to read in the morning? And, you know, what 8 meetings should I go to a week? And I was like, good Lord, girl, I have no idea what you're talking about. You know, I was like, whoa, Nellie, you know, slow it down, sister. She's 3 years sober. I'm like, come on, darling, where's your own responsibility here, right? Let's just go. I'll take her through the steps the way I was taken through the steps, because the way she went through the steps was something I've never heard of before. I don't know. I have no idea where this gal came from, but she's got almost PTSD. And I hate that for Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, things like that concern me about Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, when I get somebody like that who truly is almost PTSD from her last sponsor, I think that's horrible. Alcoholics Anonymous is all-inclusive, right? It's all-inclusive. There's room for everybody in here. There's room for the big book basher to the Lucy Lily, you know. It's whatever you need, Alcoholics Anonymous can be, as long as you're not drinking. That's all we ask, really, right? I came to Alcoholics Anonymous not even to stop drinking, if I'm honest. I just wanted to stay out of wet beds with ugly people. I mean, that was my motivation. That's the truth. You know, I didn't realize there was so much more on offer here. You know, but I didn't know how to stop drinking. And my first sponsor really helped me with that. And she took me through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and she explained the history of Alcoholics Anonymous to me. How one drunk talking to another is all it is. You know, I got really concerned about saving Alcoholics Anonymous in London, right? There was a whole movement in London, it's still there, but it's not as big, called Save Our Sobriety. And it was about Alcoholics Anonymous without God. Okay. But they were taking over meetings and really changing things, and I was getting very concerned about Alcoholics Anonymous, because obviously God needs a right-hand man, and I'm it, right? And I'm the one that's going to go out there crusading, and my sponsor just pulled me aside and said, you know, Hilda, all Alcoholics Anonymous ever needs is 2 people in a big book. That's it. You don't really even need the big book, but we're lucky we have it. If there's one other person who believes the way you believe, Alcoholics Anonymous can't die. It can't. You know, Dr. Bob said if we fell, we'd fall from within, not from without. You know, it's within Alcoholics Anonymous. So my job as a sponsor is to help my sponsees understand how to apply the program of Alcoholics Anonymous as practical application to your life. It is a practical program. It is not theoretical or esoterical. It is practical. There is a practical application, especially as 6 and 7. I love 6 and 7. I'm not going to do my 6 and 7 talk, but I love it, practicing opposite behaviors and doing something different. I mean, it is practical application. The 12 traditions, I do the steps, traditions, and concepts with the women I sponsor. They always think the concepts is because they got in trouble, but I think it's important to share the concepts of Alcoholics Anonymous. But when we do the traditions, when I sponsor the women I sponsor, and we go through the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, we do how does it apply in Alcoholics Anonymous, how does it apply in your life, and how does it apply in your relationships. And it's all relationships, right? It's your relationships at work, it's your relationships with your partners, whatever. For me, that really helps people understand that Alcoholics Anonymous is a whole lot bigger than your meeting on Friday night, right? It's not just about showing up at a meeting. It is practical application in my life. And all of those things can be practically applied, you know? The bottom line with sponsorship, it's just about helping another alcoholic, right? We're not mothering, we're not directing them, whatever. And I didn't think I was going to be able to talk about sponsorship this long, but apparently I can. I have opinions. And I was at a conference not so long ago, and after every speaker, they did this this non-disclosure thing that said, you know, the opinions expressed here are those of the speaker only. So I'm going to remind you that the opinions expressed here, it's just my experience. It's just my experience. You know, if you have a different experience, or you sponsor differently, or you believe sponsorship is different, good on you. Run with it. You know, the pamphlet on sponsorship, questions and answers, every single topic that they have, you know, do we loan money? Do we talk to employers? Do we talk to families? Do we do this? Do we do that? The do's and don'ts of sponsorship, it's all in that pamphlet. But every single one of them starts with, depends on the circumstance. Every circumstance is different. And there's one part in there that I love. It says, relax. Just relax. You know, if your sponsee won't take the spiritual side of the program, relax. Right? It doesn't have to be so rigid. You know, I think the most important thing to remember is that the women I sponsor today, when they sponsor women and they sponsor women, what I do and what they see me do is what they carry through. I am the example, whether you know it or not. You know, I'll end on this. I sponsored a woman for a long time, and I met her first meeting. I was speaking and she was drunk, and I mean drunk. You know, Andy-pandy legs. And during my talk, she got up and Andy-pandied all the way to the bathroom and Andy-pandied all the way back, you know. And, you know, when people Andy-pandy legs, it's like, you know, they're about to fall and they don't. That's when I met her. And after the meeting, I met her in the parking lot, and I said, look, Laura, just go to a lot of meetings and try not to drink in between. That's all I said to her in the parking lot, you know. And I saw her about a week and a half later at a meeting, and I went, good God, you're still here, you know. And she goes, I am. She goes, you know, I've seen you all week, and a lot of people gave me a lot of advice. She goes, but you're the only one I saw all week in all my meetings. I didn't even see her in those meetings, but she was looking for me. You never know who's watching. We are the examples. You know, I truly love Alcoholics Anonymous. I came to a lying bedwetting whore, and I have turned into a good friend, a loving and monogamous wife, a true daughter to my mother, and I believe a lot of that is due to strong sponsorship. Thank you.